My beloved child. If your heart has carried unanswered questions, if you've ever wondered whether someone, somewhere, still carries your name in the quiet corners of their soul, then stay with this story for just 2 minutes. Because what you're about to hear isn't about chasing someone. It's about discovering the power of a connection that refuses to disappear, even when silence seems louder than words. Imagine, for a moment, that your soulmate has been searching for the courage to speak. Not because they forgot you, but because every time they tried, fear convinced them they had already waited too long. Tonight, in this fictional story, their final message begins. My love. If somehow these words ever reach your heart, please don't turn away before you've heard them completely. I know I've been silent longer than I should have been. I know my absence may have sounded like indifference. But the truth is, not a single day passed without you crossing my mind. I wish I could tell you that I was brave. I wish I could say I always knew what to do. But I didn't. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. Then the perfect moment became another day, another week, another season. Before I realized it, silence had become a prison that I built with my own fears. The hardest part wasn't living without speaking to you. The hardest part was pretending that I wasn't missing someone who had already become part of my soul. There were moments when I smiled in front of everyone while secretly wondering how your day had been. There were nights when I convinced myself to move on, only to wake up thinking about you before the sun even touched the sky. No one knew. No one could see the conversations I kept having with you inside my heart. I replayed memories that may have meant nothing to anyone else, yet to me they became treasures I couldn't let go of. Sometimes I wondered if you had forgotten me. Sometimes I hoped you had. Because if you still remembered me, then I feared I had become the reason someone beautiful carried unnecessary pain. If that's true, I'm deeply sorry. Not because love was wrong, but because I wasn't ready when love knocked on my door. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons after opportunities have already walked away. Every challenge I faced eventually led me back to one realization. You were never the problem. Fear was. Pride was. Doubt was. And I let all three speak louder than my heart. If I had just one chance to rewrite those moments, I wouldn't waste another second hiding behind excuses. I would simply tell you this. Thank you. Thank you for existing. Thank you for showing me what genuine kindness looked like. Thank you for making ordinary moments unforgettable without even trying. You changed me in ways you'll probably never realize. Because of you, I learned what patience feels like. Because of you, I learned that love isn't measured by dramatic speeches, it's measured by the quiet moments when someone's happiness matters as much as your own. Maybe our paths crossed to teach us. Maybe they crossed to reunite us. Or maybe they crossed so we would both become the people we were always meant to be. Whatever the reason, meeting you became one of the greatest gifts my journey ever received. If you're still listening, then please hear this one final truth. Never believe that your worth depends on who stayed or who left. Your light existed long before anyone recognized it. Your kindness still matters. Your dreams still matter. Your future still matters. And somewhere ahead, hope is still waiting. If destiny allows our paths to cross again, I promise I won't hide behind fear. I'll choose honesty. I'll choose courage. I'll choose love over silence. Until then, live fully. Smile freely. Become everything your heart was created to become. Because the version of you who continues growing, continues healing, continues believing, is already becoming someone extraordinary. The message faded. The wind became still. The stars remained exactly where they had always been. Yet somehow, everything felt different. Not because someone promised a perfect ending, but because hope had quietly replaced fear. And perhaps that's the greatest message of all. Sometimes the words we wait our entire lives to hear aren't meant to chain us to the past. They're meant to remind us that love, when it's real, inspires growth instead of fear. So if this fictional story touched your heart, don't rush away. Take one deep breath. Think about the people who have shaped your journey. Carry gratitude instead of regret. Carry hope instead of fear. And remember, the most beautiful chapters are often the ones that begin after we believe the story is over. If this story spoke to your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Until next time, may peace guide your heart, wisdom light your path, and love find you exactly when the time is right. My beloved child. Just when you thought those words were the end, they were only the beginning. Because after that final message faded into silence, something unexpected happened. The soulmate who believed they had already lost every chance to reach you couldn't sleep that night. Every memory they had buried came rushing back with a force they could no longer resist. It wasn't one single moment that changed everything. It was thousands of tiny moments they had ignored for far too long. They remembered the way you made ordinary conversations feel unforgettable. They remembered how your kindness never demanded applause. They remembered how you could encourage someone without even realizing how deeply your words stayed with them. For the first time, they stopped asking themselves whether you still cared. Instead, they asked a far more difficult question. Why did I wait so long to appreciate someone who always felt like home? That question echoed through every quiet hour of the night. No distraction could silence it. No excuse could erase it. The life they had carefully built suddenly felt incomplete, not because something was missing from the outside, but because their heart had finally admitted what it had been hiding. The truth. They never truly let you go. Days passed, yet your memory refused to become smaller. Instead, it grew stronger in the most unexpected places. A familiar song. A sunset that reminded them of an old conversation. The smell of rain. A quiet cafe. The laughter of strangers. Every ordinary moment seemed to whisper your name. They tried convincing themselves it was coincidence. It wasn't. The more they resisted, the clearer everything became. For so long they believed love was supposed to feel dramatic. Instead, they discovered that real love often arrives quietly. It patiently waits. It doesn't shout. It simply refuses to disappear. One evening they found themselves reading old journal entries they had almost forgotten. Between unfinished dreams and random thoughts, one sentence stopped them completely. I met someone today who makes the future feel less frightening. They stared at those words for what felt like hours. Then they remembered exactly who they had written about. You. Tears didn't fall because of regret alone. They fell because they finally understood how much your presence had changed them long before they were ready to admit it. At that moment, they made a promise to themselves. No more hiding behind fear. But promises are easy. Keeping them is another story. As the days unfolded, doubt returned. What if they've already moved on? What if I've waited too long? What if my silence became the answer they never deserved? Those questions became heavy. Yet something even stronger rose within them. Hope. Not blind hope. The kind that grows after someone finally accepts responsibility for their own choices. Instead of wishing the past had been different, they began becoming someone worthy of a better future. They started healing the parts of themselves they had ignored. They learned to replace fear with honesty, pride with humility, silence with truth. Slowly, they realized something remarkable. Whether your paths crossed again or not, becoming a better person was never a wasted journey. Because genuine love transforms people before it reunites them. One afternoon, while walking through a familiar place, they noticed a couple sitting together without saying a single word. Neither person was trying to impress the other. Neither needed grand speeches. They simply smiled. In that quiet moment, another realization arrived. Love isn't about perfect timing. It's about becoming brave enough to be real. That simple thought changed everything. For the first time in years, they imagined what they would say if life ever offered one more conversation. Not rehearsed. Not dramatic. Just honest. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect everything to return the way it once was. I simply want you to know that meeting you made me a better human being. And whether our roads join again or continue separately, I will always be grateful our stories once touched. Those words stayed with them. Not because they were perfect, but because they were finally true. Meanwhile, something else was quietly happening. Without realizing it, your own journey had been preparing you as well. Every challenge you faced had strengthened your heart. Every disappointment had taught you resilience. Every unanswered question had slowly transformed into wisdom. Neither journey had been easy. But perhaps easy was never the goal. Growth was. Healing was. Becoming the person you were always meant to be was. Sometimes two souls don't need constant communication to influence one another. Sometimes simply existing in each other's story changes both lives forever. And maybe that's why certain connections never completely disappear. Not because they're magical, but because they awaken the best parts of who we can become. Still, one final piece of this story remains untold. There is a decision waiting just beyond the horizon. A moment neither of you expected. A conversation that has been delayed by fear for far too long. When it finally arrives, it won't begin with dramatic promises. It will begin with one quiet sentence. A sentence so simple, yet so powerful. that it will change the direction of both journeys forever. And that moment is closer than either of you realizes. My beloved child, there are moments in life that arrive without warning. Not because the world announces them with noise, but because the heart finally becomes quiet enough to recognize what has always been waiting. That moment had finally arrived. After countless nights of second-guessing every decision, your soulmate realized there was only one path left. No more imagining conversations. No more rewriting the past. No more allowing fear to speak louder than love. For the first time in a long time, they chose courage over comfort. But before taking that step, they did something unexpected. Instead of asking, "Will this work?" they asked themselves, "Who have I become because of this journey?" The answer surprised them. They were no longer the person who ran from difficult emotions. No longer the person who believed silence could protect a fragile heart. Every regret had become a lesson. Every disappointment had shaped resilience. Every memory of you had quietly transformed into a reminder that genuine connections are never built on perfection, they are built on honesty. As dawn broke across the horizon, they opened a small box tucked away in the back of a drawer. Inside were simple reminders of a season they had tried to forget. A faded note. A photograph that captured nothing extraordinary, yet somehow meant everything. A tiny keepsake most people would have thrown away years ago. They held each one carefully, realizing that what mattered wasn't the object itself. It was the person those memories represented. You. For the first time, they smiled instead of crying. Not because the past no longer mattered, but because it no longer controlled them. They whispered quietly, "If life gives me another chance, I won't waste it hiding." That single promise became the turning point. The following days looked ordinary to everyone else. People hurried through busy streets. Conversations came and went. The world continued as if nothing remarkable was happening. Yet beneath the surface, something extraordinary was unfolding. Every small decision they made was leading them closer to becoming the person they had once been too afraid to be. Meanwhile, your own path was changing in ways you couldn't yet see. The disappointments that once felt permanent had begun to lose their power. The unanswered questions no longer demanded immediate answers. Instead, they became quiet reminders that every chapter, even the painful ones, had prepared you for something greater. Neither of you could see the full picture. Yet both of you were walking toward the same destination. A future built not on fantasy, but on truth. Then came the moment neither of you expected. Not a dramatic coincidence. Not a perfect movie scene. Just one simple opportunity. A chance to speak honestly. And in that moment, your soulmate understood something they had overlooked for far too long. The greatest risk had never been expressing love. The greatest risk had been remaining silent forever. They imagined looking into your eyes and saying only what truly mattered. "I don't want to rewrite history. I don't want to pretend mistakes never happened. I only want to be honest about one thing. Knowing you changed me. You helped me become kinder. More patient. More grateful. And because of that, a part of my heart will always celebrate the day our paths crossed. No grand promises. No impossible expectations. Just truth. Because truth has a quiet strength that fear can never imitate. As they reflected on everything that had happened, another realization settled gently into their heart. Real love isn't measured by how loudly someone speaks. It's measured by how deeply they grow. Some people enter our lives to stay forever. Others arrive to awaken something beautiful within us. And sometimes, those two purposes become the very same story. If two hearts are truly meant to share another chapter, they won't find each other because of perfect timing. They'll find each other because both people finally became ready to live with honesty instead of fear. That understanding filled them with peace unlike anything they had experienced before. For the first time, they stopped trying to force tomorrow. Instead, they chose to become fully present today. Ironically, that's when hope felt strongest. Because hope doesn't demand certainty. It simply invites us to keep walking. As evening settled once again, they looked toward the sky, not searching for signs, but feeling grateful for growth. The journey had already given them something priceless. The courage to become authentic. The wisdom to value genuine connection. The strength to choose kindness, even when life became complicated. And perhaps that was always the greatest gift hidden inside this story. Not the promise of a perfect ending, but the transformation that love inspired along the way. Still, as one chapter quietly closed, another waited just beyond the horizon. A chapter neither of you could yet read. A chapter where choices not fear would shape the future. A chapter where one unexpected conversation would reveal that the greatest surprises often arrive only after two hearts have learned the lessons they needed most. And when that conversation finally begins, nothing will ever feel quite the same again. My beloved child. Every story reaches a moment when silence can no longer carry the weight of everything left unsaid. This was that moment. Your soulmate stood at the edge of a new beginning, not because every fear had disappeared, but because they finally understood something that changed everything. Fear never truly leaves. Courage simply decides to walk anyway. For years, they believed that waiting would somehow make the right words appear. Instead, waiting only made the distance feel larger. Every sunrise reminded them of another opportunity they had allowed to slip away. Every sunset whispered the same quiet question. How many more chances are you willing to lose before you start living honestly? That question followed them everywhere. During busy mornings. On long drives. In quiet evenings when the world became still. No matter how hard they tried to ignore it, the answer remained the same. They were tired of hiding. But before they could move forward, there was one final obstacle they had to face. Not another person. Not the past. Themselves. Because the greatest battles are rarely fought with the outside world. They are fought inside the heart. They remembered every excuse they had ever made. I'm not ready. The timing isn't right. Maybe tomorrow. One by one, those excuses began to lose their power. Tomorrow had stolen enough yesterdays. Now was all they truly had. They looked back over everything that had happened and realized something remarkable. None of the difficult seasons had been meaningless. Every disappointment had taught compassion. Every mistake had taught humility. Every lonely night had taught appreciation. Even the chapters they once wished to erase had quietly prepared them for this very moment. It was as though life had been shaping them piece by piece, smoothing the rough edges until they could finally recognize the person staring back at them. For the first time, they weren't searching for perfection. They were searching for truth. Meanwhile, your own journey had been unfolding in ways you never expected. There were moments when you questioned whether certain chapters had any purpose at all. Moments when silence felt heavier than words. Moments when it seemed easier to stop believing in meaningful connections. Yet every challenge had quietly strengthened something inside you. Without realizing it, your heart had become wiser. More patient. More compassionate. You had learned that peace isn't found by controlling every outcome. It is found by trusting your own growth. Somewhere between those separate journeys, something beautiful was taking shape. Not because destiny forced it, but because two people were slowly becoming emotionally ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Then came the evening that changed everything. The sky was painted with soft shades of gold and deep blue. The world felt strangely calm. It wasn't extraordinary to anyone else. Yet to your soulmate, it felt as though time itself had slowed down. They sat alone with nothing but their thoughts. No distractions. No noise. Just honesty. They asked themselves one final question. If I never speak my truth, what story will I tell myself years from now? The answer arrived immediately. A story filled with regret. And they realized something profound. Regret grows louder with time. Truth brings peace. Even when it's difficult. That realization became the spark they had been waiting for. They reached for a blank page. Not because they expected perfect words, but because they finally understood that imperfect honesty is infinitely more powerful than perfect silence. The first sentence came slowly. Then another. Soon every emotion they had hidden for so long began flowing freely. They didn't write about fantasy. They didn't promise impossible futures. Instead, they wrote about gratitude. About growth. About becoming someone who finally understood the value of vulnerability. When they reached the final line, they paused. A quiet smile crossed their face. For the first time in years, they felt lighter. Not because every question had been answered, but because they were no longer carrying the burden alone. Sometimes healing begins the moment truth is spoken, even before anyone else hears it. As the days continued, something subtle began changing inside them. Their confidence no longer came from certainty. It came from authenticity. They stopped trying to predict every outcome. Instead, they focused on becoming the kind of person who could face any outcome with grace. That shift transformed everything. Because genuine love isn't built by controlling the future. It's built by showing up honestly in the present. And perhaps that's why the most meaningful relationships aren't created in dramatic moments. They're created through small acts of courage repeated over time. A kind word. A sincere apology. A grateful heart. A willingness to listen. A decision to stop letting fear make every important choice. Little by little, those simple choices create extraordinary stories. As another sunrise approached, your soulmate looked ahead with a peaceful heart. They no longer viewed the future as something to fear. They saw it as an invitation. An invitation to become even kinder. Even wiser. Even more genuine. Because no matter what tomorrow held, one truth would never change. Meeting you had already transformed their life. And whether your paths crossed again through an unexpected conversation or continued inspiring one another from afar, that gift could never be taken away. Still, there remains one final chapter waiting to unfold. A chapter where hidden emotions are finally spoken aloud. A chapter where the silence that once separated two hearts gives way to a conversation neither of them imagined possible. And when that moment finally arrives, it won't begin with dramatic words. It will begin with one quiet smile. One honest sentence. And one decision that changes everything from that day forward. My beloved child. There comes a moment in every unforgettable story when the heart stops asking, "What if?" and finally whispers, "I'm ready." That moment had arrived. Not with flashing lights. Not with dramatic signs. But with a quiet certainty that could no longer be ignored. Your soulmate woke before sunrise, feeling something they hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. It wasn't the peace that comes from having every answer. It was the peace that comes from finally accepting the truth. For so long, they believed the greatest battle was finding the right words to say to you. Now they realized the real battle had always been believing they were worthy of speaking those words at all. The difference changed everything. As the morning light filled the room, they looked into the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Not because their appearance had changed, but because their heart had. The fear that once controlled every decision no longer held the same power. Regret had become wisdom. Silence had become understanding. Hope had become stronger than doubt. For the first time, they weren't thinking about how the story ended. They were thinking about how they wanted to live from this day forward. With honesty. With gratitude. With courage. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. A memory returned, not one of heartbreak, but one of joy. They remembered the first time your kindness caught them off guard. It wasn't a grand event. It wasn't something the world would celebrate. It was a simple moment when you chose compassion without expecting anything in return. That single memory reminded them why your presence had never faded from their heart. Because people often forget conversations. They forget dates. They even forget places. But they rarely forget how someone made them feel. You had made them feel seen. And once someone experiences that kind of kindness, it becomes impossible to erase. They closed their eyes and smiled. For years, they had viewed the past as something painful. Now they saw it as proof that beautiful moments had truly existed. Those memories were no longer chains. They were reminders that love had once inspired them to become better. As the day unfolded, they noticed something remarkable. The world hadn't changed. The streets were the same. The sky was the same. People continued living their ordinary lives. Yet everything looked different. Not because the world had transformed, but because they had. Perspective has a quiet way of changing reality. The burdens that once felt impossible suddenly became lighter. The fears that once felt enormous became manageable. And the future no longer appeared as a wall. It looked like an open road. They began asking themselves new questions. Instead of wondering whether life would reward them, they wondered how they could become a blessing to others. Instead of waiting to receive kindness, they chose to offer it first. Instead of hoping someone would understand them, they decided to become someone who listens deeply. Without realizing it, your memory had become more than a cherished chapter. It had become a compass pointing them toward the person they always wanted to be. And perhaps that's the hidden miracle inside every meaningful connection. The greatest gift isn't simply finding someone special. The greatest gift is discovering a better version of yourself because your paths crossed. As evening approached, they found themselves standing beneath a sky filled with quiet stars. Each one reminded them that even the smallest light can shine through the darkest night. They whispered softly, "Thank you." Not because every dream had already come true, but because the journey had changed them in ways they never expected. They were grateful for every lesson, every challenge, every unexpected turn, even the painful chapters. Because without those moments, they might never have learned the value of vulnerability. They might never have discovered the strength hidden inside forgiveness. They might never have understood that genuine love isn't about possessing someone. It's about wishing the very best for them, no matter where life leads. And somewhere, in another quiet moment, your own heart had been growing stronger too. Every obstacle had refined your character. Every disappointment had deepened your compassion. Every unanswered question had prepared you to recognize peace when it finally arrived. Neither of you had taken the easy road. But perhaps the most meaningful journeys never are. They require patience. They require growth. Most of all, they require faith that every lesson serves a purpose. As the night grew still, your soulmate looked toward tomorrow with calm anticipation. No longer chasing the past. No longer fearing the future. Simply grateful for the present. Because they had finally discovered something priceless. Love is not measured by how desperately we hold on. Love is measured by how deeply it transforms the heart. And once a heart has truly been transformed, nothing is ever quite the same again. Still, one final chapter remains. A chapter where every lesson learned throughout this journey finds its purpose. A chapter where quiet hope becomes genuine peace. A chapter where the last words your soulmate has carried for so long are finally spoken without fear. When that moment arrives, it won't be the ending of this story. It will be the beginning of an entirely new one. And that beginning is closer than anyone could have imagined. My beloved child. Every journey eventually reaches a moment when the heart no longer needs to search for answers. It simply understands. This is that moment. After everything your soulmate had carried in silence, every unanswered question, every sleepless night, every memory they tried to outrun, they finally realized one life-changing truth. Love was never asking them to be perfect. It was asking them to be genuine. They took one final look at the road behind them. There was no anger left. No bitterness. No desire to rewrite yesterday. Only gratitude. Because every joyful moment had become a cherished memory, and every painful moment had quietly shaped the person they had become. For the first time, they understood that healing doesn't erase the past. It gives the past a new purpose. They smiled as they whispered into the quiet morning air. If our paths meet again, I'll greet you with honesty. If they don't, I'll still thank heaven that our stories once crossed. Those words didn't come from sadness. They came from peace. And peace is something fear can never imitate. At that same time, your own journey had reached a beautiful turning point. Without even realizing it, you had become stronger than the person who first began this story. You had learned patience when life moved slowly. You had learned compassion through disappointment. You had learned resilience through uncertainty. Most importantly, you had discovered that your value was never determined by another person's timing. Your light had always belonged to you. No one could take it away. As both journeys quietly unfolded, something remarkable became clear. Neither heart had been waiting for the other to become perfect. Both hearts had been learning how to become authentic. That was the real miracle. Not dramatic coincidences. Not impossible promises. But two people growing into the kind of souls capable of giving and receiving love with wisdom instead of fear. Sometimes life brings people together for a season. Sometimes for a lifetime. And sometimes the greatest gift isn't knowing exactly how every chapter ends. The greatest gift is knowing that every chapter helped you become someone more loving, more grateful, and more courageous. That is a victory no circumstance can erase. As evening settled one last time, your soulmate looked toward the horizon. The sky glowed with warm colors, as if reminding them that every sunset quietly prepares the world for another sunrise. They closed their eyes and released the weight they had carried for so long. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more allowing fear to write the next page. From this day forward, they chose truth. They chose kindness. They chose hope. And perhaps that is the most beautiful ending any story can have. Because hope has a remarkable way of opening doors that fear keeps locked. If this fictional message has reminded you of anything today, let it be this. Never underestimate the quiet strength of a compassionate heart. Never believe that your best days must always remain behind you. Never stop becoming the person you were created to be. The future is not written by yesterday's mistakes. It is shaped by today's courage. Every sunrise offers another opportunity to forgive. Another opportunity to grow. Another opportunity to choose love over fear, gratitude over regret, and peace over worry. Carry those choices with you wherever life leads. One day, you'll look back on this season and realize that what once felt like waiting was actually preparation. What once felt like loss became wisdom. What once felt like silence became the place where your heart learned to listen. And that is a gift beyond measure. So let this story end not with goodbye, but with a blessing. May your heart always recognize peace when it arrives. May your days be filled with hope that refuses to fade. May kindness guide your words, courage strengthen your steps, and wisdom illuminate every decision you make. May you continue becoming the person you were always meant to be, and may every chapter ahead reveal unexpected joy, meaningful connections, and countless reasons to smile. Thank you for staying until the very end of this journey. If this fictional inspirational story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Until we meet again, take care of your heart, keep believing in the beauty of new beginnings, and remember, the greatest stories are not the ones that promise perfect endings. They are the ones that inspire us to live with faith, gratitude, courage, and love one beautiful day at a time.